Hi, I'm Chun-Lu.
And I'm Sal, and this is Our Next Make. We're just a few days away from 3D Experience World, the annual conference where thousands of SOLIDWORKS users and other Dassault Systems customers get together to share knowledge and have a ton of fun.
We'll be at the Maker Zone, mingling with the attendees, exchanging ideas, and getting inspired. In preparation for the event, we thought we'd design a few things to take with us.
I'm always inspired by making things that are useful around the shop, so I thought I'd try to design something that I could give to other makers that would help them with common measuring and marking tasks. This is what I came up with. And I'm happy to say that the first 100 people that find us at the Maker Zone will walk away with one of these handy little gadgets.
And don't worry if you miss out on the giveaways. We'll be handing out candy for any feedback you give us, and instead of throwing the wrappers away, we'll be asking you to deposit it into one of these cool containers as a vote. These containers have been designed to be easily collapsible, transported, and then quickly reassembled without any fasteners or glue. So I can't wait to see the votes pile up.
Let's see what it took to make these. Before jumping into the design, I used the idea funnel in our SOLIDWORKS for Makers license to capture all of the thoughts I had for the different functions of the tool. We find this to be a great way to keep track of all the projects we want to accomplish over time. I then turned to SOLIDWORKS to help me figure out the layout of my idea. To get started, I just built a simple rectangle about the size of a credit card, and then I cut away material for each of the features. I experimented quite a bit with the placement of each detail, because as I would add one to the card, I'd have a new idea that would inspire me to move things around. Having SOLIDWORKS made it really easy to find the perfect layout. I then made a drawing of the design, so I could get all of the numbers and symbols in the right place, and then ultimately I exported it as an Illustrator file so Chun-Lu could use it at the laser cutter.
To prepare a vector file for laser cutting, we first need to be able to adjust the color and the line weight of the graphic. In Illustrator, I take the graphic from the AI file Sal exported from SOLIDWORKS. I isolate all the lines and numbers that I want to engrave into their own layers and make sure that they are all set to RGB black 000. The engraved art will be a shallow cut on the surface of the acrylic that we can flood with black paint to make them more readable. Now I group all the lines that will be the cut lines and set them to RGB red 25500. I take an extra step of knitting all the line segments together into a cut path. This way the laser will travel around in a smooth path, leaving behind a clean cut, especially around the sharp corners. Lastly, I need to set the cut lines to a line weight of 1/1000th of an inch. This way, this hairline line weight will reinforce to the laser cutter that it is to be treated as a cut line and not an engraved line. Once the vector graphic is done, the appropriate power, speed, and frequency for the laser is set for the 2mm acrylic and sent to the laser cutter. With the protective lid shut, we begin the laser cutting. It takes care of the engraving first, processing quick, shallow bursts, line after line like a printer. Then the laser powers up to cut the inner profiles before the outer ones. Once complete, we remove the job, pop out any lingering pieces that may have melted back in place, and rinse clean the project. We use a small brush with stiff bristles to get as much of the black acrylic paint into the thin engraved grooves as possible. We let it dry for up to 10 minutes or until the paint is tacky. Then we dry rub as much of the surface paint off as possible, chasing it with a lightly acetone dampened paper towel to clean up any stubborn spots. We repeat the process as necessary on spots that may still need more paint.
Let's see this thing in action. To mark the center of a board's thickness, you place the notch on the board and then rotate it so that either end makes contact. Then, place your pencil in the small recess and mark the line. The 1/16th of an inch spaced openings in the middle of the card can be used to mark offset lines from the edge of a board. Just place your pencil at the desired offset and run the card's edge down the side of the board. There are 2 different sized arcs on the card that you can use to round sharp corners. And there's a compass that will let you draw circles up to 6 inches in diameter. Just place one pencil in the pivot point and another at the desired distance, then get to drawing. You can use the 45-degree detail to mark a line just about anywhere, but it's specifically positioned to help you mark the center of square stock in preparation for turning it on the lathe. Just match the corner of the card with the corner of your stock and mark opposing lines. There's also a depth gauge on the side that lets you set the height of your table saw blade. This is particularly useful when cutting rabbets or dados to common depths. And of course, there's a ruler on the side. Now let's take a look at the voting container. Even a simple design like this can benefit from a quick modeling exercise. We used X-Design to work out the overall size of the container, as well as the location and depth of the grooves for the acrylic and rope. Having a model like this allows us to easily make changes and provides us with the dimensions we need to build it in the shop.
Making the containers starts with ripping 1/2-inch plywood into 5.5-inch strips. Then I set the blade height to 1/8 of an inch and start to cut the grooves for the acrylic panels as well as the rope that will hold the containers together. I use a featherboard to keep the wood tight to the fence and a push pad to hold it down to the table. I find that thin plywood like this can bow, so a bit of downward pressure helps ensure the grooves are cut to a consistent depth. As I approach the end of the cut, I switch to a large flat push stick so I can safely maintain downward pressure while pushing the wood completely past the blade. To cut the small bevel detail on the container, we swap out the throat plate and tilt the blade to 45 degrees. For cuts like this, I like to move the rip fence to the left of the blade. This allows me to keep the wood above the blade, which I find allows me to make a safer cut. Of course, wherever you place the fence, you must continue to use proper technique and body position to keep yourself safe. At this point, it makes sense to do a bit of sanding because we're about to cut the wood into a bunch of smaller pieces. To do that, I set up a stop block on the miter saw and cut the pieces to length. I make sure to keep the pieces in the correct order so we can have grain match all the way around the container when we assemble it. Back at the table saw, Sal sets the blade to 60 degrees using our digital angle finder. Double checking that angle now is a good idea, as digital angle finders do have a tolerance of about plus or minus 0.2 degrees. I cut the miters on the short pieces in much the same way as I did the bevels on the long pieces. I took several passes to creep up on the exact fit, then ran each piece through twice to cut the opposing angles. To make the hole in the top piece, I set up a jig on the drill press and then used the largest Forstner bit I have. I finished up by using my palm router to add a 1/4-inch round over the inside edge of the hole. Our goal is to have the components of this container flattened down to something we can pack easily in our luggage and not add too much weight. We didn't want to have any metal fasteners nor glue that can spill or burst during travel. So a rope is more than sufficient, and we can use a simple square knot to hold everything in place. If you've never tied a square knot before, just remember this phrase: left over right, right over left. Once at the event, we can line the pieces up, cinch the rope around the sides, and add our labels to each container. Now we are ready for the show. Bring on the candy wrappers. I love how this turned out. It's so compact and useful.
Yeah, and I love how this immediately inspired a million other ideas for tools just like it.
As for this, I can't wait to see how it performs at the event. And when it comes home, I can't wait to give it new life.
Yeah, and I love how versatile the design is. You could scale it to any size you want. You can also swap out one of these panels for a different shape and immediately turn it into something else. I'm thinking it could become a piggy bank in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, and you could also turn it into a lamp or a terrarium.
Yeah, sky's the limit. Whatever your imagination holds, I'm sure this design could work with it.
And if either of these projects inspired you to make your own, please share it in the comments.
And we really hope to see you in Nashville. But if we don't, we'll see you on our next make.